Phanibhushan Saha lived as a modern, educated man in an environment that felt entirely disconnected from time. His estate sat isolated along the banks of the Ganges, surrounded by overgrown trees and the dark water of the river. By day, the colonial mansion was quiet. By night, an oppressive, heavy silence settled over the property. He shared this isolation with his wife, Manimalika. She had little affection for her husband. Her emotional capacity was entirely consumed by a singular, intense fixation on accumulating gold, pearls, and diamonds. She enjoyed wearing them, but she loved hoarding them even more. Phanibhushan's quiet life fractured when his business encountered a severe financial crisis. He suddenly required a massive influx of cash just to keep his operations afloat. He knew his wife's attachment to her wealth, so he approached the subject delicately. He asked Manimalika to temporarily hand over her jewelry, promising to return every piece the moment the business stabilized. Manimalika did not argue. She simply fell completely silent, her facial expression hardening. The thought of surrendering her gold to her husband triggered a deep paranoia, immediately overriding any fragile trust that existed in their marriage. Rather than help him, she sought out a distant relative named Madhusudan. She confided in him that her treasures were no longer safe at home, and the two began devising a plan to smuggle her entire fortune off the estate. Her anxieties spiraled over the following days. Convinced she was about to lose her hoard, she finalized a desperate plan to slip away under the cover of darkness and return to her father's house. The gold she hoarded had driven a hard wedge between them, severing their emotional ties long before she ever packed her bags to leave. When the household finally slept, Manimalika emptied her locked boxes. She took every single piece, necklaces, earrings, heavy bangles, waist chains, and physically draped her body in solid gold. Coated in her wealth, she slipped out into the thick of the night. She met Madhusudan by the riverbank. Together, they boarded a small wooden boat, pushing off into the dark, slow-moving currents of the Ganges. The next morning, Phanibhushan woke to an empty house. He sent messengers, but neither his wife nor Madhusudan ever arrived at her father's home. Days turned into weeks, then months. The boat, the gold, and the two passengers were never seen again. By choosing to run with her fortune, she vanished completely. The river swallowed her existence without a trace, leaving Phanibhushan alone with an agonizing, unanswered void. In the wake of her disappearance, Phanibhushan deteriorated. The mansion emptied of life, and the overwhelming quiet began to wear down his rational mind. Then, the silence broke. In the dead of night, he began to hear a distinct, metallic rhythm echoing from the distant corridors. A slow, heavy clinking, exactly like the sound of someone walking while weighed down by heavy gold jewelry. The sound grew louder night after night, creeping closer to his room. Finally, as the metallic dragging stopped right outside his bedroom door, a terrified Phanibhushan called out into the dark, demanding to know who was there. A shadow stepped over the threshold. It was a rotting skeletal frame, with its exposed bones entirely wrapped in Manimalika's missing gold. The necklaces, the earrings, the heavy bangles, all of it hung off a creature devoid of life. The figure did not speak. It simply raised a skeletal finger adorned with her rings, motioning for him to follow. Phanibhushan trailed the apparition down to the river's edge, where it boarded a phantom boat and disappeared into the black water. This horrific vision shattered whatever sanity Phanibhushan had left. His conscious reality and his darkest nightmares had become completely indistinguishable. This leaves us with a critical question regarding Rabindranath Tagore's story. Did Phanibhushan actually see the restless spirit of his dead wife, or are we witnessing the psychological collapse of an isolated, grieving man? If we examine this through a supernatural lens, Manimalika's greed becomes a literal curse. Her pathological attachment to her wealth tethered her soul to the physical world, dooming her to haunt the riverbanks. This theory carries a brutal implication. Madhusudan almost certainly murdered her for the gold the moment they were alone on the water. Her spirit is now permanently trapped inside the very jewelry she died trying to protect. This animated diagram maps out our two distinct interpretations. On the left branch, we have that literal supernatural curse. But if we look at the right branch, we find a purely psychological explanation. The ghost is a hallucination engineered by Phanibhushan's own traumatized mind. He was the one who asked for the jewelry, an act that directly triggered her panicked escape and presumed drowning. The crushing guilt of causing her death forced his brain to manifest a walking embodiment of that very guilt. Ultimately, the distinction doesn't matter to the outcome. Whether punished by a literal ghost or tortured by his own decaying mind, Phanibhushan's life ends in absolute ruin. The most disturbing detail of his vision is what the ghost lacks. Manimalika has no face, no flesh, no human features left at all. She has been completely replaced by the inanimate metal she worshipped. Tagore's Monihara survives as a brilliant piece of horror because it grounds its terror in a human failing. It warns us that when we abandon our empathy to hoard physical wealth, those same possessions will eventually orchestrate our destruction.